trying to keep this as quiet as possible because there are other people in the house. And that doesn't make any sense considering I'm trying to be quiet to not disturb them, yet I don't want them disturbing me. I had several concepts come up in while sitting here that you would think would be beneficial to share, but now that I'm sitting here recording, I'm struck with a conflict of whether or not I should, which is in and of itself a conflict, which is disturbing. But let me get these ideas out before I forget them. The idea that people are affected when they're thinking, the way that they're thinking, the way that they perceive things. They're affected by their surroundings in terms of the energy of the environment that they're in. If you're thinking, you'd be sitting alone in a room surrounded by books. You'll think about something. And as you progress in your own personal process to come to a resolution or an understanding or furthering the thought, there's a certain process that you follow, a certain chain of ideas and counter ideas that come to you. But if you were to continue that thought in a room with other people, their energy affects the way that you're thinking, and therefore your whole thought process is affected, it's changed. So I don't like the idea of everything being connected in that regard, because I guess see, and then it gets into the argument of ego. And that was another thought that I had, is that what it all comes down to is that if the idea is to transcend ego, then what says that my personal thoughts have any more validity than anyone else's? It's all ego, so it's self-defeating. What I mean by that is, I have to put a certain modicum of belief that what I'm saying is valid, that my personal philosophy is valid, whatever it is that I'm thinking about, whatever I'm talking about. These ideas are mine, and they're valid because of whatever. But it's ego to assume that it is valid simply by that, simply by those parameters. And I'm probably going to lose this whole train of thought in a few minutes. And capturing it now is a after effect. There we go. Slight adjustment to the previous statement that I made in regards to the idea of whether or not one's own thoughts are legitimate based on ego, is that I think that in order to be able to, I've said this many times before and never recorded it, is that the problem with thinking is that if allowed to go without any sort of restriction, and I don't mean restriction in the sense of being confined to a particular parameter, just being confined, leaving it open to not being able to be interpreted is pointless. If it's free-flowing and it has no reference points, then the thoughts are lost simply because you don't know what they're referring to. It's one of the things that many people have said, that they've come up with ideas and concepts and then lost them because they wrote them down, but because they have no frame of reference, because it was in a dream state or something. They had no frame of reference at that point that they're reading it. So to adjust the idea that I was talking about earlier about whether or not ego can be considered when dealing with thinking. Can you place value in your own thoughts because of the fact that it's ego to say that your thoughts have value? But those particular parameters of thinking, just thinking, the process of thinking as defined by your experience, is that reference point. So your thoughts have value, or your thoughts are legitimate, if for any other reason than to be able to have a reference point that makes sense to you. And this entire string, because when I'm watching this, I'm not going to be in the frame of mind that I'm in right now. It's going to make no sense, which is very disappointing. It's one of the reasons why I cannot stand the fact that I fall out of this. To be in this frame of mind regularly would give me a level of satisfaction and fulfillment to my life. But because of the fact that I become clouded and deluded, not delusional, but deluded, because of filtering the effects that life has, and it's filtering on me, this particular state that I'm in right now is deluded. And therefore I can't come to the same processes of thinking. I'm not free to continue to continue the thoughts. The problem, however, is that, as I've said many times before, when thinking, is that without, and this will go back to the point I was trying to make, without the definitions of that without a defined set of parameters to work within, they will continue to spiral outwards with no bearing. But the points that you come to later on will have no meaning because there's nothing to refer them to previous to that, because you removed the confines of the concept. And that in and of itself is a disturbing thought, that in order to think outside of boundaries, one has to establish boundaries. Then how do you determine if those boundaries are worthy to begin with? I mean, how do you know that you're leaving enough space for progression and not limiting where the progression can go? And this whole thing's going to make absolutely no sense when I play it back tomorrow. Well, it'll make sense. I'll be able to follow it logically, but the state that I'm in right now, I won't be able to do this again until I come to the opportunity, and I don't know when that'll be. But at least I've recorded it, and that's important.